Viewer discretion advised. This video contains sensitive content that may be disturbing to some listeners. Please proceed with caution. Hey, I'm Joseline. I was born in Bolivia as an only child, which always made me feel a little alone at home. My parents worked a lot, so I spent most of my days at my maternal grandmother's house, just a few blocks away. That place was a different world for me. My grandparents, uncles, and cousins all lived together under the same roof. I loved being there because I could play with my cousins, who were more or less my age, and there was always something to do. Among all the family members, my uncle was the youngest of my mother's brothers. He was 16 years old when I was barely 7. For my grandmother, he was like the son of the family. She adored him madly, and even the cousins saw him as the favorite because he always brought something for them. Whether it was candy, balloons, or some simple toy he took out of who knows where. He was thin, with messy black hair and a smile that inspired confidence. I loved him very much, and I felt safe with him. He practically earned my trust based on affection and gifts. But everything changed one day when my parents left me at my grandmother's house because they had to work. This wasn't unusual, but that morning, my grandmother went to the market with her jute bag and told me to stay in the yard until she returned. I was there, running around and inventing games with a stick and some stones, when my uncle came out of the house and called me from the door. "Joseline, come here. I want to show you something," he said. His voice sounded calm and casual. He told me he had balloons for me, those colorful ones I loved so much, but that I had to go to his room to get them. At 7 years old, I didn't suspect a thing. Balloons were a treasure for me, so I left the stick on the floor and ran after him, excitedly. His room was small, with an unmade bed in the corner, an old table full of junk, and a tiny window that barely let in any light. It smelled of humidity and stored clothes, something I never liked. But because of the affection I had for him, the state of his room was the least of my worries. Besides, he was going to give me some balloons. He told me to sit on the bed while he looked for the balloons in a drawer. I sat down and looked at the ceiling, swinging my feet with a smile, not knowing what was about to happen. He took out a couple of red and green balloons, but instead of giving them to me, he approached me and told me that first, he needed to help me with something. I didn't understand what he meant, but suddenly I felt his hand on my leg, slowly going up. I stood still, as if my body didn't know how to react. I was such an innocent girl. I didn't understand the seriousness of the situation. I just knew I didn't like it. He gently pushed me to lie down on the bed, and before I could say anything, he unbuttoned his pants. I remember him climbing on top of me, the weight of his disgusting body crushing the mattress. My head was a whirlwind. I didn't understand what was happening. He started touching me over my clothes, breathing hard near my face. I looked at the ceiling, still frozen but with my heart racing, wishing that all of this would end. When he finally got off, he lifted me from the bed as if nothing had happened and gave me the balloons. He looked at me seriously and then spoke with a hoarse, dark voice that didn't seem like it belonged to him. "Don't even think about telling anyone. If your parents find out, they're going to scold you for accepting toys from me." I just took the balloons and ran out to the patio. But of course, I didn't want to play anymore. I sat in a corner, watching how they wrinkled in my hands, with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. This, unfortunately, wasn't an isolated incident. Another afternoon, I was playing in the living room with my older cousin, who was 9 years old. That cousin was more reserved. She always brought a book. My uncle was drawing when he entered the living room and told my cousin, "Hey, come here. I have a gift for you, but you have to go up to the room with me." I already knew what was coming and, terrified, I hid under the wooden table. From that shelter, I saw how he took my cousin by the hand and led her away. I heard the creaking of the bed, the murmur of his voice telling her something I couldn't understand, and then a terrifying silence. When they left, my cousin came back with a pale face and red eyes. She looked for me, and when she found me under the table, she crouched down next to me. My cousin told me what had happened, something that didn't surprise me, but what did surprise me was what she told me next. He had done the same thing to 2 other cousins. To prevent them from talking, He told them that if they did, they would be seen as dirty little girls. This happened 2 more times. Each time he followed the same pattern. A toy or a candy as bait, then the dark room, then the terror, and then the threat. I didn't know how to stop him. One night I couldn't sleep. I woke up sweating with my chest tight. I ran to my mother's bed. It was dark, and through my tears, I told her that my uncle was touching me. I expected my mother to comfort me or promise to protect me, but she just turned over in bed, half asleep, and told me to let her know if it happened again. Nothing more. I stood there in the darkness, not knowing what to do with that answer. After that night, my uncle tried to do it again. I was in the yard, kicking an old ball, when he called me from his bedroom window. He was holding a red car and a small doll, saying that they were mine if I came in with him. But something in me broke that time. I told him no, that I wasn't coming in. He looked at me strangely, as if he couldn't believe my words. Then, furious because I wouldn't take no for an answer, he went after me, grabbed my arm and pulled me inside. I started screaming, "No, I'll tell my mother." I cried so hard that the neighbors might have heard me. Suddenly, he let go. He pushed me out and yelled at me to get out of the house and that he never wanted to see me again. I ran out with my heart in my throat, but relieved and safe. That was the last time he touched me. From that day on, something changed. He avoided me and I did the same, but what happened was still engraved in my memory. Unfortunately, sometimes I wondered if I should tell my father. He was more serious than my mother, more protective, and maybe he would have acted. But the fear of my uncle's threats kept me silent. About 5 years passed. I was already 12, and my uncle had moved from my grandmother's house to work in a factory in another city. One day, the news arrived. My uncle had been electrocuted while fixing some cables and died instantly. The family collapsed. My grandmother locked herself in her room, and the uncles talked about how unfair it was that he left so young. I, on the other hand, stayed in a quiet corner, pretending to be sad, but inside, I felt a relief that burned in my chest. I thought that everything was over at last. That monster would never hurt me or any of my cousins again. It even crossed my mind that maybe it was karma, that life had taken its toll on him for what he did to us. I knew it wasn't right to think like that, but for me it was a real break. To this day, the family remembers their uncle fondly. They say he was a good boy who left very young, and what a shame. I don't say anything. I stay silent, gritting my teeth, thinking that they have no idea who that wretch really was. Nobody knows the truth except my husband, years later, who listened to me when I told him everything and helped me ease that weight a little. Even so, I tell you that while I was writing my story, the tears came out on their own. I felt it was necessary to tell it, even if it was so that someone else would read it and think twice before leaving their children with just anyone. I end by thanking you. If you're enjoying the video, please subscribe the channel for future videos, and like and share with your friends. Hello guys, I'm Sebastian. I prefer to keep my anonymity, please. I'm Spanish, and this story happened when I was 19 years old. I had just moved to a city quite far from my hometown to complete my studies. I started sharing an apartment with another girl my age who was looking for a roommate to share expenses. We hit it off immediately during our interview. I was very happy to live with her, so to protect her identity, let's call her Vanessa. The first few months living with her were great. We had different studies and schedules, but when we spent time together, we had a lot of fun. We used to go shopping, have drinks, and even had some parties at home on weekends, inviting our friends. We really had a great time. Everything was going well until one of those Saturday parties came around. Vanessa told me she had been forced to invite her cousin because her aunt and mother had insisted a lot. The thing is, the boy was quite antisocial and strange, and they were trying to get him to integrate and socialize a bit through Vanessa. I told her not to worry and that we were sure we were going to have a great time. That night, Vanessa brought her cousin and introduced him to all of us. Let's call him Ezekiel. We greeted him warmly and immediately offered him a drink to help him integrate, but it didn't work out. Ezekiel ended up isolated in a corner of the room. The thing is, the boy scared most of our friends a little because of his appearance. He had an emo aesthetic despite being 22 years old, but beyond that, he was the type of person who radiated a bad vibe. You know those people who, for no apparent reason, don't give you enough confidence to approach. Well, it was something like that. But what really shocked me was the way he looked. He had that kind of look that somehow makes you feel uncomfortable. And although that's how I felt, for better or worse, I am a person with a very developed empathy. Despite knowing that it didn't depend on me, somehow I felt the responsibility of making him feel more integrated. But believe me, this was the worst mistake of my life. I wish I had never done it because that's when my hell began. I approached him with a smile, expecting one back, but it didn't happen. He just looked at me as if I owed him something. Even so, I kept approaching. When I had him in front of me, I greeted him. He returned the greeting in a dry way. We started talking, and to break the ice a little, I told him that in my adolescence I had been gothic and liked dark themes, metal music, and all that. When I talked to him about those topics, it seemed that he was feeling more comfortable. Little by little, he ended up participating in the conversation actively. I admit that at that moment, I liked him and didn't think he was a bad person. In the end, we had a good time. When everyone went home, Vanessa asked me if I minded Ezekiel spending the night with us. Neither she nor I were in a condition to drive because we had had a lot of alcohol, and the boy's mother couldn't come get him because she worked at night. I told her it was no problem, and we went to sleep. He stayed overnight in the living room because we only had 2 bedrooms. I got into bed and fell asleep quickly, but what happened next is something I remember as terrifying. I'm a pretty light sleeper and tend to wake up at the slightest noise, so it was no surprise when I woke up. I tossed and turned in bed, trying to go back to sleep, and suddenly I realized that the door to my bedroom began to open slowly. That creaking sound caught my complete attention. Unless it was a huge emergency, no one should be entering my room, much less at that hour. At first, I thought it could be Vanessa, feeling ill or something, but it was when I heard deep, heavy breathing that I knew something was wrong. In the middle of the darkness, I opened my eyes just a little and I swear my blood ran cold when I saw that it was Ezekiel sneaking into my room. I thought he had gotten into the wrong room and was looking for Vanessa, but then I noticed him coming up to me and crouching down to be at my height. With fear in my body, my first reaction was to pretend I was still asleep to see if he would leave. But unfortunately, he didn't. I felt him grab one of my hair, curling it around his finger. With my heart in my mouth, I don't know how long he was like that, but for me, it felt like an eternity. Then he let go of my lock of hair, caressed my hair, and as if nothing had happened, he left, closing the door again. After that, of course, I couldn't go back to sleep peacefully. The next morning, I woke up with a horrible headache. I sat up, got out of bed, and walked to the door to leave, but then I remembered what had happened the night before. With the discomfort and fear of being alone with Ezekiel, I slowly opened the door to see if he was there or if there was someone else. The point was that I wouldn't be alone with him. I realized that Ezekiel was no longer there, and although I felt an instant relief, I began to question if what had happened the night before had been real or just a bad dream brought on by alcohol. But in order not to foolishly alert my roommate, I preferred not to say anything. In my innocence, I thought that I would never see him again and that it had been an occasional thing, but you don't know how wrong I was. Since that day, Ezekiel had an extreme fixation on me. He started coming to the university every day when I finished my workday. At first, I thought maybe he was waiting for a friend, but I soon realized that he only came looking for me. The first few times, although I was surprised, I simply thought that he had liked me and I was polite to him. I answered the questions he asked me about my life, my tastes, customs, and things like that. But over time, that routine began to feel suffocating and heavy because when I told him that I had things to do and that I had to go study or something like that, he insisted on accompanying me. Likewise, in every occasion that he could, he invaded my personal space. One day, I saw him in the park that was right next to the apartment block, half hidden behind a tree, watching me as if he was stalking me. That was when I no longer had doubts that the events of that night had been real, and I began to get scared, really scared. Several months went by like this, as if Ezekiel had become my shadow. By then, I had stopped being polite to him and was being colder and more inaccessible, hoping he would give up his harassment. but it seemed not to be enough. One afternoon, the worst came. I was alone at home, preparing for an important exam when I heard a knock at the door. When I went to open it, my heart sank. It was Ezekiel. Apparently, he was looking for Vanessa, but when I told him that she wasn't home, instead of leaving, he invited himself in to wait for her. I was already desperate, but since it was Vanessa's cousin and this was also her house, I didn't dare kick him out rudely. Instead, I told him to wait for her in the living room watching TV or something, but that I had to study and needed solitude and tranquility. He told me he wouldn't bother me, but something in those eyes of his and the way he looked me up and down terrified me. I didn't want to see him, but now I know that look contained an insane perversion. I swear it hadn't even been half an hour when I heard footsteps coming towards my room. I prayed that I was wrong, that I heard wrong, and that those weren't footsteps but something else. Anything but footsteps, because that meant Ezekiel was coming towards me. And my heart jumped into my throat when I heard the door opening. Ezekiel entered my room without even knocking. He asked me what I was studying and approached my desk to look over my shoulder. Already very annoyed with his attitude, I told him to get out of my room, that I needed to concentrate. But he completely ignored me. I don't know what the hell happened, but if his harassment until that moment had been suffocating, in that instant, it became worse. From 1 second to the next, he became violent and possessive. He grabbed me by the shoulders, hurting me, shook me, and threw me on the bed. Then he pounced on me, starting to yell at me just inches from my face, telling me that I was an ungrateful bitch, that he was always looking out for me and I ignored him, that I was a pig for ignoring his romantic feelings towards me, that no one was going to love me with the same intensity that he loved me, and other horrible things. I was so shocked that I didn't know what to do. After that, he started breathing irregularly and very agitated, as if the whole situation was suddenly exciting him. I started to cry because, seriously, the fear I had completely dominated me. I was having an anxiety attack or something similar. He continued talking, telling me that he was completely in love with me, that I was driving him crazy, and that I had to be his girlfriend. I didn't want to listen to him and kept struggling to try to escape. But then the worst happened. He grabbed my face to force me to kiss him. I resisted as much as I could, but he began to put pressure on me, and I could barely move. He was very strong. Suddenly, he grabbed my hand and forced me to touch his crotch while he said, "Look how you put me. All this is your fault, and you are going to fix it." That completely paralyzed me. It's something I think I'll never be able to forget. I would love to tell you that everything ended there, but no. In fact, things only got worse. I don't think I need to go into more details. I don't even remember when it all ended, neither when Ezekiel left nor when Vanessa arrived home. I was disconnected from reality. Everything that happened after that moment of terror became blurry with time. Vanessa told me the state she found me in when she got home. I worked up the courage to tell her what her cousin had done to me. Between tears and hugs, she apologized and told me that she didn't know her cousin could go to such extremes. But she also scolded me, telling me that I should have told her everything from the beginning because she would never have left me alone with him. But she understood the pain and shame I felt because it was her cousin. After that, she herself took me to the police station to file a report. The police said they would do everything possible to help me. Thank God. Many years have passed since then, and although I have mostly gotten over it, writing it now has helped me more than I thought. I admit that my hands still shake on the keyboard. The only thing I take away from that whole situation is having met Vanessa, who, to this day, is still my best friend. She's the only one who knows my story, and she was always there, supporting me and helping me overcome the situation. She never left me alone after that, and I will always be grateful to her. This has been my experience, and it will haunt me for rest of my life. I want to share a story that I experienced with my mom's taxi driver boyfriend. It wasn't just something weird or uncomfortable. It was real harassment. Telling it now, years later, still makes my stomach knot. My childhood was a mess. My mom was never discreet with her relationships. Ever since I can remember, she was unfaithful to my dad. She wasn't one of those women who hide things carefully. No, she would bring her boyfriends home as if nothing was wrong, introducing them to my sisters and me as if they were new uncles or something. How normalized it was. My mother always told us to be nice, and we, being the daughters, were little and just obeyed. Most of them were taxi drivers, and since they took us to school or wherever we needed without charging us, my mom said we had to be grateful. It was like an unspoken deal. They did us favors and we had to behave with them and, above all, keep our mouths shut with my dad. My dad knew everything. I think he wasn't blind. He saw them coming and going, and even my uncles told him to leave my mom, that it wasn't worth it. But he never left, at least not while we were little. He said he'd put up with it for us, that he didn't want us to grow up without a mother or a father. So he just sat there, swallowing it all while my mom did what she wanted. My mom's boyfriends, at least the first ones that I remember, weren't mean. We even liked some of them. They bought us candy or told us funny stories about their passengers. But the last one, the one that came when I was 15, was different. The moment I saw him, something about him gave me a bad feeling. He was a big guy with a raspy voice. It seemed like he was always yelling, even though he spoke normally. I don't know. There was something in the way his eyes looked that made me nervous, like he was always looking for something beyond what he was saying. At the time, I had a boyfriend from high school. Nothing serious, just teenage stuff. Once, we tried to take it to the next level, we tried to do adult things, but his mom caught us. Just in time, and nothing happened. It was a very embarrassing moment, but it remained just that. A failed attempt. For some reason, my mom became convinced that this had been my first time. I never got the idea out of her head. And the worst thing is that she went to tell it to her taxi driver boyfriend as if it were any old gossip. It hurt me because, obviously, it's something very personal, and you can't tell it to just anyone, much less someone you've only known for a few months. I worked back then at the taxi base where my mom also worked. It was a noisy place with radios and guys yelling at each other. What I did was simple. I finished my shift, and the taxi driver took me home after dropping my mom off at the base. At first, everything was fine, but one day, while we were in the car, he asked me some questions that left me frozen. We were on a quiet street with little light, and suddenly he says, "Hey, your mom told me that you already had your first sexual relationship. How was it? How big was it? Did it hurt? Did you bleed?" Just like that, as if he was asking me about the weather. I was speechless. I felt a heat rising up my neck, and his hands started to sweat. What are you supposed to answer to that? He was a man of about 40, and I was a 15-year-old girl. He wasn't my dad, he wasn't my uncle, he wasn't anyone who had the right to ask me something like that. It disgusted me and scared me so much that I only managed to look out the window, hoping the road would end soon. When we finally got to my house, I was about to open the door when I felt something put its hand on my leg. I stayed still for a second, turned to look at the hand, then turned to look at him and saw that he was staring at me. While we were seeing each other, he said, "I'll always be your friend, You can tell me everything with confidence. I'll solve your doubts." I remember his disgusting hand, hot and heavy, and I just wanted to get out of the car and run. I don't know why, but I told my mom that same night. I thought that she was going to support me, that she was going to be mad at him. Oh, how naive. Instead of that, she went crazy with me. I'm going to ask her if she said that, and if she didn't say it, you'll see how it's going to turn out for you, she yelled at me. She was more worried about defending him than what he was doing to me. I think he did say something to him because after that, the guy changed with me. When I went to the house, he looked at me ugly, like I had done something to him. He wouldn't talk to me anymore, but he was always hanging around. Unfortunately, it didn't stop there. Every time he saw me on the street doing something, he would run to gossip to my mom. If he saw me with friends and I stayed a little longer at school, whatever it was, he always exaggerated everything, making me look like the disobedient one, the bad girl. It was like he wanted to control me through her. My mom believed everything, of course, and I ended up punished or listening to sermons for things that weren't even true. I put up with it for a few years until I couldn't take it anymore. As soon as I had the chance, I married the first decent guy I met and got out of there. I'm ashamed to confess, but it wasn't out of love or anything. I just wanted to get out of that house, out of that life. My mom always put that man above me, and I couldn't handle it anymore. After 13 years of being with him, my dad finally left my mom. I had also walked away by then. I already had my own daughters, and that taxi driver started making comments that made my hair stand up. "How pretty they are," he said, looking at them in a way that I didn't like at all. The guy wanted them to give kisses and hugs, and I flatly refused. I wasn't going to let my girls go through anything remotely similar to what I went through. I cut off all contact with my mom. After that, I moved to another city, far away from her, far away from him. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I live more peacefully now, but every time I have to go back to that city for some reason, I see him. He's still a taxi driver, driving the same streets, and every time I run into him, he takes out his cell phone, takes pictures of me, and sends them to my mom. I don't know what he intends with this. I'm no longer the skinny, scared teenager he met. I'm a grown woman with my life made, but he's still there, like a ghost that won't go away. Once, I tried to file a harassment report. I went to the police and told them everything, the questions, the groping, the photos, but they didn't take me seriously. They told me there wasn't enough evidence, that it was all in the past. I felt so helpless that I never tried again. Sometimes I think about how my mom never believed me and never put me first. I hope whoever hears this understands that children are not to be betrayed like that. If you believe something, don't leave them. No one, not a boyfriend, not a friend, no one should walk over them. I learned that the hard way, and there are still nights when I wake up sweating, remembering that guy's hand on my leg and his voice asking me things I should never have heard.